Our topic is essential documents and generic drug launch. So as we were discussing about clinical research and the important documents in clinical research, we have already seen the important documents like informed consent form, case report form, and protocol. Not only this, there are many documents which are involved in clinical trial are called as essential documents. So without documentation, you cannot say that something has happened in the clinical trial. So it's not about the verbal confirmation or verbal documentation. It's always about the paper documentation. So in clinical trials, we say if it is not documented, it is not done. So we'll be looking into the list of essential documents and how they are differentiated in clinical trials, and also about the generic launch. What is a generic drug and how it's launched and how it is different from the normal clinical trial drug molecule with a generic drug molecule. Essential documents. So the definition is the documents which individually and collectively permit evaluation of the conduct of a study and the quality of the data produced. So any document which individually and collectively permit evaluation of the conduct of a clinical trial and the quality of the data that we are collecting from the clinical trial. So any such document which is used in clinical trial is called as an essential documents. The importance of essential document is to serve to demonstrate the compliance of a trial and also trial personnel with the standards of good clinical practice and with all regulatory requirements. So where we should keep these essential documents? We are talking there are multiple essential documents. So we should keep it in the investigator file. So we have something called investigator site file, which stays at study site. And we have a trial master file, which sponsor, CROs, and also study site can have access to. So investigator site file will have all acknowledgements and details related to the study site and also ethics committee and regulatory body. Where in trial master file, we also call this as an electronic trial master file, where we are going to upload the scanned copies of the documents into the electronic trial master file. Investigator file is a hard copy which stays at site. Trial master file can also be an electronic trial master file where the documents are scanned. We call that as a certified copy, and these documents will be uploaded into the trial master file by clinical operations team. And there are separate designations as well, TMF specialist, senior TMF specialist, and TMF lead, where handling these documents itself is a department. We call it as a records and management department, where they are solely looking into the quality of the documents and how they are uploaded into the electronic trial master file. So labeling the ISF with usually any clinical trial will have a protocol number and they'll have a clinical trial name. So we are going to label this investigator site file, which stays at study site, as investigator site file with the clinical trial name and the protocol number and name of the principal investigator. So each site will have an investigator site file, and overall for a study, we will have an electronic trial master file. This is the location where we are keeping our essential documents. And coming to essential documents are differentiated into 3 stages. Essential documents are differentiated into 3 stages. One is before the trial commences and during trial. So before the conduct of a trial, during the conduct of a trial, and also after completion of a clinical trial. So before clinical trial commences means before when we had first subject, first visit. We call something as FSFV, which is first subject, first visit. So we need to get approval. We have already discussed about ethics committee, regulatory authorities, everything. So getting an approval, preparing the documentations, preparing the protocol, designing a case report form and working on the study documents, everything will fall under your before the trial commences. During the clinical trial, we have subject data. We are doing screening, we are having patient enrollment, we are giving subjects investigation product, we are managing investigation product. So we'll have all documents related to the during clinical trial commencement. And after completion of the trial, we'll have different set of clinical data where we are going to have a clinical study report, like last subject, last visit. When I say first subject, first visit, you'll also have last subject, last visit. So we call it as an FSFV and LSLV. So these are the important milestones in the clinical trial project. So let us see on each how many documents are covered to understand differentiations like before, during, and after completion of a clinical trial, and which document will fall under which stage. So before the trial commencement, we have many documents that are falling in place. Signed protocol. When you have a study protocol, and if the study protocol has completed the signatures, when it is completed the version control, then it is called a signed protocol. So before a trial is started, obviously you should have a protocol ready in hand. Then we should have an investigator brochure. What is an investigator brochure? Yes. The clinical and non-clinical information of the investigational product will be in the investigator brochure. That should be ready. And sample case report forms. Case report forms should be handy. Patient information sheet and also informed consent form. A template of each and every document that we are using in the clinical trial. Informed consent form in any different languages. So for example, if the subject cannot read English, they need a local language informed consent form. So we do translate the English informed consent form into local languages. So what do? We translate from English to Telugu and we translate from Telugu to English. So this is called translation and back translation of a document. So why we are doing back translation? To see that nothing is missed during a translation. So not only use Tamil language and Hindi, Marathi, wherever it is a requirement of local language informed consent form, it will be used. So we're going to have informed consent vernacular languages, that is your local language, translation certificates, translation certificate. English to Telugu, Telugu to English, English to English. English to Malayalam, Malayalam to Hindi to English. English term used in the informed consent form has been translated exactly as the same in the local language. Back translation documents as well. And any approval documents related to your regulatory authorities and your ethics committee approval documents under trial commencements. Any ethics discussed about composition also will have standard operating procedures. So documents related to that also will under before clinical trial. Clinic financial aspects where paying investigator, how much payment we contract research, and also what are the study, like when we are going to start the clinical trial, what if investigator is not enrolling, all those will be trial agreement. So agreement will not trial. Signed any financial out of interest document is required and some of the stakeholder that has to fit in your before trial commencement. Then we have CV of all research team. So we are going to collect curriculum vitae from all the study site, like your investigator, sub-investigator, study nurse, study coordinator, whoever is involved and working at site level. We're going to collect the CV of those study team of the site staff. And that also should be applicable and that also should be collected before a clinical trial commencement. Delegation log. So delegating the responsibilities. So what are the responsibilities of investigator will be highlighted in the delegation log, and responsibilities of study nurse, study coordinator, in case if there is any like placement cell officers, or in case if there are any people apart from them, like for example, field officers or pharmaceutical quality management team or IP management team at study site level. So even their designation and what they are going to do and start date of the employment will be available in the delegation log, and any standard operating procedures from the study site. instructions and documents for handling and transporting the investigational product, how to handle and how to transport, and trial initiation report. When the study is started, we call it as a study site initiation. When the study is initiated, we should have a trial initiation report. Shipping records, because investigational product will be courier in the sense will be sent by the sponsor to the study site. So we should have that shipping records as well, because if sponsor says that we have given 20 investigation products to you, it should be recorded in the document. So as I mentioned, if it is not documented, it is not done. Decoding procedures for the blinded clinical trials. We discussed about blinded and unblinded studies. In case if there are blinded trials and if there is any serious adverse event happening at the clinical trial, how we are going to decode, how we are going to break the blind. That document and the procedure document should be available. And normal values, what are the blood pressure, sugar, or any other commencement like your chest X-ray? What are the exact values that we are expecting for the enrollment? And we will be using laboratories for any blood analysis, urine analysis, or sputum analysis. So we should collect that particular lab accreditation certificates, whether it is a registered lab or not. And curriculum is that particular laboratory head as well. Calibration certificates for the technical equipment. In case if you're using a centrifugation machine, or if you're using an MRI scan, calibration certificate and check that that particular instrument any calibration certificates. If you're using even the weighing scale, stethoscope from the investigator, everything has to be calibrated. So we will be having calibration certificates for any equipment that we are using in the clinical trial. And lab manual or any other laboratory related documents. CTRI registration number. So CTRI is a Clinical Trial Registry India number. So if a clinical trial is registered and happening in India, it will have a CTRI number. So that's CTRI number. Insurance statement. In study site should have an insurance. If some natural calamity happens or if something happens to a subject, we can claim that insurance as well. So there should be insurance at study site. Letters to patient or consultant. So in case if we are also distributing a letter with an informed consent form, which says that we are going to take care of the subjects, we are going to look out for the subjects in case if they're having any abnormalities, even that letter has to be filed. Or any other document related to the subjects, like subject diaries or any advertisements that we have done for the patient recruitment, everything should be filed before the clinical trial is started. Copies of questionnaires or any other patient-related documents. All these documents will fall under before clinical trial commencement. So when I'm explaining about each and every document, you should try to make out the difference. So before we complete, like after we complete this, during and also conclusion, you will have an idea why these documents are differentiated like that. So if you see here, we don't have any amendment related documents because amendments might happen after a clinical trial is started. So these are the list of documents that are used before the clinical trial initiation. And then we have the list of the documents during the clinical trial. So in case if there are any protocol amendments, so what is an amendment? Any change in a document is called an amendment. If there is any change in a protocol, that is called a protocol amendment. If there is any change in investigator brochure, then that is called investigator brochure amendment. Any change in case report form or informed consent form are called as amendments to that particular document. So any updates to IBs or CRF or any approval documents, if in case after the clinical trial is started, in case we would require a reapproval, then we would require that approval documents as well. Signed patient consent form. So if you see in the before, we had a template of informed consent form, and during the clinical trial, because informed consent process is happening and the subjects and investigator has to complete the consent form signatures. So you should have a completed informed consent form, which we are calling it as a signed informed consent form. Source documents like your laboratory, chest X-ray reports, patient-related reports like their date of birth proof, their chest X-rays, their laboratory analysis, all these are your source documents. Notification of any serious adverse event or protocol deviation or violations. Interim reports, because study has already started. We will be having study status reports, how the progression, how many subjects are enrolled, what adverse events has happened, and what sort of concomitant medications that we are using. Everything will be highlighted in this interim report. And this interim report will be submitted to the ethics committee. We also have study status report, because every monthly once or quarterly once we are going to submit this to the ethics committee. Monitoring visit reports, because there will be monitoring happening. So once subject enrollment is started, there is a role called clinical research associate, where they are going to monitor how the clinical trial is happening. So they are going to write a complete detailed report about the items that they have reviewed during this clinical trial visit. That report is called as monitoring visit report. And audit reports, in case any audit is happening during that clinical trial process, we'll also have audit reports. And completed case report forms. We discussed about template case report form in the before clinical trial. Here we are going to enter each visit status and data into the case report forms. Any data correction forms, in case if we are using the data rectification or correction forms, that documents as well. And documentation for data corrections. Shipping records for investigational products and study trial related materials. Signature sheet. For any change that investigator has made, there will be a signature sheet. Updates related to study team, in case if someone is study nurse and in case other is joining, updated CV and delegation will be updated with their end date. So all those updates related to the study site team. Updates related to any laboratory documents, in case of genuine changing or if they change, you need a new calibration to that equipment or documents. All relevant correspondence with ethics and research and development. Any relevant email communications or any relevant applications that we are sending to sponsors and ethics committee, those documents. And some of the logs, we have subject identification log, which will have the subject numbers. So what is the screen as the application number? Numbers will be highlighted. Screening log, where things have been screened, all particular people have been enrolled into those dispensing log. So how many drugs has been dispensed to each subject? So we will have drug dispensing log. In case of 20 drugs is been given by the sponsor, how many has been used, how many has been not used, and how many are left over. And there will be some destruction certificates as well. In case if the drug is no more used, we are going to destruct that drug at the study site. So accountability is also calculating this particular drug. So in case if you have 10 subjects and if you have 20 drugs, each subject would have already got 2 drugs with them. So if you are enrolling new subjects, then you need investigation product. So now sponsor has to send investigation product. So you will have shipping records to it and you will have the accountability log. How many subjects are there? How many drug received? What that is an investigation product and how many has been used. We do have temperature log where we are going to record the temperatures of the investigational product. So for example, if it is said in the investigator brochure that this particular investigational product has to be maintained 4 degrees Celsius, then we are going to look out for this particular temperature maintenance through refrigerator. So there will be a digital apparatus connected to the refrigerator where we are going to look for the temperature, equipment, and the maintenance. So this temperature maintenance is very important. If the exact temperature for the investigational product is not maintained, then you cannot use that investigational product. Record of retained tissue samples. In case if you are retaining any tissue samples or blood samples, why you are retaining, and there will be a retention record, you need to highlight that in that particular retention record. So these are the documents that will be listed during the clinical trial, and these are not limited to any number of documents can be, and should be able to like which document to before, during, or after a clinical trial completion. These are the list of documents that we can see after clinical trial completion. So number one is drug accountability and drug return. So nothing but your IP accountability and your IP returns. So accountabilities. So once it clinical trial is completed, if there are available, those are highlighted in the document. Say sponsors that sponsor many you have used were not being maintained in a particular temperature, and are you going to return those investigation product, and what is the sponsor decision? That, and also it will be file master. So whatever documents we are discussing will be available in the master. So documentation of drug destructions, sorry about it, and also lab kits. So as I mentioned, in case if the drug is not used anymore, if sponsor wants to destruct the drug at the study site, so the investigation product is going to be destructed with a set of rules and regulations that are given by your sponsor. Acknowledgement of any final reports to ethics committee. So we need to update the ethics committee that the study has been completed. So in case if investigator has to report it from the study site about the study closeout or study closure, those reports, and acknowledgement of study status report, because you need to submit the final study status report to the ethics committee, and clinical study report, which consists of the everything that has happened during the clinical, the entire data, how many subjects enrolled, how many had an adverse event, what is the progression of the treatments that they have used, are they going further with this drug, and how this particular investigation, what are their primary objectives and secondary objectives, is that clinical trial has achieved these objectives that are listed in your call. Everything will be highlighted in the clinical study report. So final closeout monitoring reports. So study closeout, which is the last visit at the study site, those related monitoring reports, and completed subject ID code list. Because when we say about blinding, so blinding and randomization, there will be each subject ID receiving the treatment number. So when we break the blind, we are going to write even the drug name as well. So that particular list where once the breaking of blinding is happened, because end of the study, we have to break the blind. And if there are any audits happened, you disclose out and those audit certificates. So these are the important documents before, during, and after completion of a clinical trial. So we also do have something called period. So though completed, if we are not going to miss of this clinical trial, the list of before, during trial completion. So there is a period that, it has to is nothing but storing the documents. So there should be a separate room where the entire documents related to a clinical trial has to be stored. There should be a separate cabin where we are going to store. And if coming back to electronic trial master file, all the documents will be saved in a database. So trial files has to be archived, and this is called archiving. Once the study is completed, all documents have been submitted, stored, then you are going to archive the study. So the investigator should set up study specific files in all appropriate documentations, and it should be filed in a archival shelf or archival room. All study documents must be stored in a safe, secure, and confidential environment. And this should have access only for the study team. Anyone from the hospital cannot come and access or review the reports, because the data that we are using is very confidential. Avoid leaving files, a particular ALCA principles and a particular maintenance of documentations has to be performed. So as mentioned, there is a slogan in clinical trial: if it is not written down, it did not happen. And if it is not documented, it does not exist. So anything in the verbal communication is not going to work in the clinical trial. everything that is happening in the clinical trial, every discussion has to be written down and everything has to be documented. So you can see these documents in the ICH GCP document as well. So as I've already shown how an ICH GCP document looks, this is the document of ICH R2. We have multiple times discussed about this document. If you go to the sections in this document, table of contents, under the section 8, under the 8, you can see for the clinical trial. So click here, take you to this section. So it has a brief description about this and also the points what we discussed before the clinical phase of a trial commences, before a clinical trial is started. And we have also discussed about investigator site file. So ISF investigator site file is going to stay at your study site. And sponsor is going to have a document, sponsor CROs, they will have electronic trial master file. So this document explains you what is the description of a document, this investigator brochure, what is the description and purpose of this document, and whether this document is stored in investigator site master file and whether it is stored in your electronic trial master file. So this document has not only has before, and you also have the documents related to during clinical trial commencement, during the clinical trial conduct. And you have also have list of documents that are applicable for after clinical trial. So whenever you have time and read each, so I've already document and why it is important. Also read the list of each document in this. So after completion. So you have before, during and after completion. And section 8 in the good clinical practice talks about your essential documents. About your essential documents. So let's jump into the generic drug. So generic drug. So you would have heard about a term called generic drug. So a generic drug is a pharmaceutical drug that contains the same chemical substance as a drug that was originally protected by the chemical patents. So generic drugs are allowed for sale after the patents on the original drugs expire, because the active chemical substance is the same as your original drug. And also a generic drug has the same active pharmaceutical ingredient. We call it as a API as the original drug. So for example, Dolo 650 is already available in the market. If I want to make a generic drug of this Dolo 650, so Dolo 650, I'm going to name it as a Polo 650. So when I do a clinical trial to release a drug called Polo 650 into the market, then I'm going to call it as a generic drug for Dolo 650. So there are generic drugs available in the public domain as well. So there is something called Jan Aushadhi in India, which is launched by Pradhan Mantri, that is our Narendra Modi. So it is called as Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Janashadi Pariyojana Kendra. It is like, where generic drugs are very affordable. So when you're duplicating the drug with the same active ingredient, that is called a generic drug. So if I have azithromycin, I'm going to make a zithromycin. And the cost of azithromycin, in case if it is 25 rupees, I'm going to get this zithromycin only for 5 rupees. And even the Indian government has launched generic drugs for the people who cannot afford for the higher costly drug. And it is going to have the same activity. And it has active pharmaceutical ingredient. Even the regulatory body is going to approve this. not duplicate drugs. The exact, and these are called as a generic. Clinical trials as generic, that is called as studies and bio studies. Clinical trials happening, the formulation using it. So many such drugs, and it has been approved and used in the clinical trials. So this generic drug approval is called as NDA and abbreviated drug application. So A stands for abbreviated, NDA stands for new drug application. So because it is a copy of the original drug, we are calling it as a generic drug. And because it is a copy of an original drug, we are calling it as an abbreviated new drug application form. So ANDA stands for abbreviated new drug application. And we're going to mark this generic drug. And the below highlighted things shows about what we have multiple times discussed again and again about your basic drug development process, preclinical testing, and your IND application if it is an investigational new drug molecule, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you're going to submit an NDA application to the regulatory authority, which we call new drug application. Then you have phase 4, then you are marketing the drug. So the definition of a generic drug. So generic drug must contain the same active ingredients that are originated from the original formulation. So according to the US FDA, generic drugs are identical and bioequivalent to the brand name counterpart. With respect to pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamic properties, these drugs are identical strength, efficacy, the usage. So drug is manufactured. The graphical this ROAs of administration. So in case if the taken via liquid format, drug should also be in the ROA strength and route of safety, efficacy with the original drug is a product that is comparable to drug product. Form in strength for administration, performance characteristics, and also intended use. So everything, if you are duplicating the original drug, everything has to match as per your original drug. The generic drug may still have a patent on the formulation, but not on the active ingredient. So for example, if I own Dolo 650, so I will have the patent for the Dolo 650 medicine. I'll have an active ingredient. So that particular lead medicine that I'm using in this Dolo 650, I'm going to have the patent for it. But the formulation patent can be taken by generic drug manufacturer. So why we are doing this generic drug? Again, because there is a necessity of the drugs and many people cannot afford. And even the original drug company where they will have a share with this duplication company as well. So if Polo 650 is also getting good amount of money in the market, then they need to share 10 to 20% of it to the original drug formulation company. So why they are doing it? Obviously, they are copied their formulation, right? So there will be a share given to that companies as well. The original pharmaceutical company. So it is not a loss for the original pharmaceutical companies. So these studies are called as BABE, bioavailability and bioequivalence. So we are comparing. So here we are going to have our investigational product is our generic drug and our reference product is the marketed drug. So in case if I am doing azithromycin, Dolo 650, Polo 650, Dolo is my reference molecule, the original formulated molecule. And my investigation product is my Polo 650. And I'm going, because I already have the data related to the clinical trial conducted on Dolo 650. BE trials are very easy. We are giving the drug to them. So there will be two groups and one drug, the reference will be given to one subject and The investigation product will be given to other subject, and we are going to do PKPD, pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic analysis from the subjects. And we are going to compare the graph, what are the results of the investigation product, the generic medicine, and what are the results of the the original medicine. Then you're going to compare these two, and you're going to release your generic drug into the market. And 99% of your generic drug molecules will get approval, because it is just a copy of the original molecule. So why should we call this particular approval as an abbreviated approval? So generic drug applications are termed as abbreviated because they are generally not required to include preclinical or clinical trials. See, when I'm repeatedly saying it is a copy of the original medicine, and the original medicine has already undergone preclinical trials and also clinical trial. So that is why your generic drug medicines does not require any clinical trial, but they are being part of your bioavailability and bioequivalence trial. But they are not actually doing, it is not the first safety and efficacy clinical trial. There was already a clinical trial happened for the original product. Instead of generic applicants must scientifically demonstrate that their product performs the same manner as the innovator drug. Innovator drug is nothing but our original drug. So this generic drug people has to prove that, prove how they are going to prove by conducting a BA/BE study. So when you conduct a BA/BE study, then we are going to match the safety and efficacy properties what this particular drug had during its clinical trial. Even the BA/BE trial has to match it. It is just duplicating the clinical trial. So one way applicants demonstrate that a generic product performs in the same way as the innovator drug. And we need to prove that. Only when you prove that, you are going to get an approval for your generic drug. So this is to measure the time it takes the generic drug to reach the bloodstream in the healthy volunteer. So we are going to study the ADME properties of the Dolo 650. We are already aware about Dolo 650 ADME properties. Now we are going to study the Polo 650 ADME properties, and we are going to match, and it should be the exact copy of your original drug. So the demonstration of bioequivalence gives the rate of absorption or the bioavailability of the generic drug. So this can be compared with your innovator drug. So this drugs, in case if it is in India, you will get an approval from Indian regulatory body. And if it is if you're conducting this on in your US studies, then you will get US FDA approved. So to be approved by FDA, the generic version must deliver the same amount of active ingredients into patient's bloodstream. So when you get an approval from your regulatory authorities, when it is showing the same activities and the same ADME properties like your original drug. So it is important and highly important to conduct this bioavailability and bioequivalence trials, because it is important to have the generic drugs, and it is important to have this equivalence within your bioavailability and also within your bioequivalence. So bioavailability is mainly to see the rate and extent of the absorption of unchanged drug from its dosage form. So, and bioequivalence, it is like in case if you are doing to ensure that the clinical performance of the generic drug is equivalent to the original drug. And we do also do randomization, blinding. So blinding is required, meaning like we are going to say that we have a reference molecule and also we have an active ingredient and we have a duplicate. Everything will be explained during the, and everything, informed consent process, audio video consultation, everything is as same as your clinical trial. So in bioequivalence, if two products are considered to be bioequivalent, when we are saying the innovator drug and also the generic drug, they should have an pharmaceutically equivalent and equal rate and extent to which the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, becomes available at the site of drug action. So you should not have any statistical differences when you're doing this comparison. So when statistical differences are observed in the bioavailability of two drug molecules, then we call it as a bio inequivalence. If there is any difference, we are calling it as a bio inequivalence. So if there is inequivalence, then your generic drug will not be approved. So same like your bioavailability, it refers to the extent and rate at which the active ingredient, the active molecule, okay? So when the systematic availability of the drug is administered orally, and we cannot compare it to the IV administration. So if it is taken orally, it has to be gone orally only. So both bioavailability and bioequivalence focus on release of drug substance and its dosages from subsequent absorption in circulation. That is your ADME properties. So we are going to see the availability of this drug particular molecule in the particular person, and we are going to compare it with the innovator drug. So bioavailability studies are conducted to understand how much of drug is available for action, and that is called bioavailability studies. We are going to study pharmacokinetic studies, what body does to the drug. So how your body is reacting to the drug is your pharmacokinetics, that is your absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion properties. Pharmacodynamics explores how drug and what drug does to the body. So in bioavailability, we are checking pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So coming to your bioequivalent studies, we are checking, and these studies are conducted for new formulations. Compare the new formulation of any established drug with the existing formulation. And bioequivalence may be demonstrated through in vivo or in vitro test methods, comparative clinical trials, or pharmacodynamic studies, where we are going to study what innovator drug does. Already we have the data, and what our generic drug is doing to the particular bodies. And then you can release your generic drug into the market. Then we are going to continue with the topic called different type of visits in clinical research. So we have seen the essential documents in the clinical trial, and we have seen how a generic drug, so who is going to manufacture the generic drug? Whoever is conducting a clinical trial on generic drug will manufacture that particular generic drug. Now let us see what are the different types of visits we have in the clinical research. So when I say different types of visits, we are going to look into the study site perspective. So what are the different visits and how actually we call study start and study close out, how this, each CRO, sponsor, and study site are involved, and what are the different types of visits we have in the clinical research. So there are 4 types of visits which will be performed by the clinical monitor during the conduct of the clinical trial. So that 4 visits are called as site selection visit, site initiation visit, site monitoring visit, and site closeout visit. In the short format, we call it as an SSV, SIV, SMV, and SCV. There are 4 types of visits that usually clinical monitors will conduct. So during a site selection visit, so site selection in the sense, see, we have discussed multiple times, we'll have multi-centric trials where each protocol, where a study protocol, like a study site has to conduct a clinical trial, and sponsor and CRO is going to support. We have seen all this story right away. So in the site selection visit, we need to select. We cannot randomly just give a study to a clinical study site. It has to be selected. When we say that ethics committee, a study site should have an ethics committee, we are going to look out for the availability of an ethics committee with that study site. We need to see, we in the sense here, sponsor and CRO, they need to make sure that there is an ethics committee associated with the study site. And when I'm conducting a clinical trial related to oncology, I need to make sure that study site have an oncology related setup at their particular, hospitals. So how I'm going to finalize before doing that, I need to select the site. So for that, the clinical monitor or the clinical research associate is going to perform an activity called site selection visit. So clinical CRA will be associated with the project managers also during the site selection visit. So first we are going to select the site. So to select the site, our protocol should be ready. The purpose of the site selection visit occurs before the start of a clinical trial, and it involves selecting appropriate investigational sites to conduct the study. So if my study requires, a separate laboratory room, or if my study requires a temperature controlled room, because my IP has to be maintained at -4 degrees, then I need to make sure that that particular study site is having an IP maintenance room. So I'm going to choose whether that particular site is having an IP maintenance room, IP storage room or not. And sometimes I would need a 50-bedded hospitals. I don't want 50-bedded hospital associated with an OPD management. I need 50 beds for clinical trial purpose only. So they should have a separate unit. So all these are sponsor and study requirements. So this sponsor and study requirements will be taken care by the CRN project manager when they are going for a site selection visit. So during the site selection visit, representatives from the sponsor or contract research organization, that is our CRAs and project managers, they're going to visit and they're going to select the potential sites to assess their suitability based on the criteria such as patient population, facilities, like whatever the examples I have given related to the facilities, and staff expertise, whether they have an experienced staff or not, whether they have a reputed investigator or not, or there are any blacklists or black marks related to that particular investigator, or are there any regulatory compliances or regulatory issues which are already arised for that particular study site. So I need to literally study about this particular hospital before I select this site for the clinical study. So not only this, sponsor will have this list of sites or list of hospitals where they already have a black mark, or the site should also have an experience in conducting a clinical trial on the same therapeutic area. So I cannot conduct a dermatology trial in an oncology hospital. So I need a multi-speciality hospital where there is a dermatology domain as well, and where my clinical trial can be conducted. So sponsor and CRO is going to decide and finalize the site list. So it is important and very important to conduct a site selection visit. And key objectives in this site selection visit. The primary objective of the SSV are to evaluate site's capabilities, what all this particular site can do, and assess its ability to recruit and retain participants. So when you're enrolling a participant into the clinical trial, it is very important that this particular participant will be available till the end of a clinical trial. So when a clinical trial is started, maybe after 6 months, you cannot locate the participant at all. They will not be interested in a clinical trial. So we want the study site to be more interested and to show concern about the subjects as well, so that they can recruit and they can retain the particular participant, the particular subject till the end of the study. So it is very important to see the capability and the abilities of the study site. So the investigator, sub-investigator, study site, study nurse, whoever is working at the site should have a dedication towards this particular clinical trial. And also review of the regulatory documents. And we need to ensure that the site can adhere to the protocol and good clinical practice guidelines. In case if GCP is not practiced at this study site, then we are not going to enroll this particular study site into the clinical trial. So it is very important to check all the relevant information that are required and applicable for the study site. And only then you can select the study site. And there are different reports that we send. So before we are going to visit, in the sense from sponsor and CRO, before a CRA and project manager goes for a study visit, there is something called confirmation letter. So we are going to write an email to the investigator saying that we are coming to the site Okay, we are coming to your clinical site and we are going to do a visit called site selection visit. You need to take the permission from the investigator. So that is called as a confirmation report. Okay, so we are going to have a confirmation letter. So that is called as CFM, which we call it as a confirmation letter. So who is going to write this confirmation letter? So the investigator has to receive this confirmation letter by the study sponsor. So once they confirm, yes, study site and the study site staff are available, then CRA and project manager will go ahead and then conduct this site selection visit. So that is the first letter that we will send to the hospitals that are our study sites. So if study site is selected, then we are going to send them selected letter that is called as site selection letter. So once if study site is selected, then we will send a study selection letter. And now we will ask the study site to start the process related to ethics committee submissions, because the site is selected for the clinical trial. And then we have site initiation visit. So once the site is selected, now you need to initiate the clinical trial, the clinical study at the study site. So we discussed about protocol, like who reviews, who starts. So sponsor is going to review and then design the protocol. Sponsor and CRO are part of designing the protocol, and everything sponsor and CRO is aware right now. And essential documents also are designed by your sponsor and CRO. Like CRF designing, informed consent form designing, everything is done by sponsor and CRO. So when sponsor and CRO is doing everything, how is a study site is aware about this requirements and then study related documents, how to maintain, how informed consent has to be taken, what is good clinical practice. So study site will be completely unaware about this entire concept, like how you people are unaware before joining to this program. So the purpose of site initiation visit, it marks the formal start of a clinical trial at an investigational site. So a study site is called as investigational site. And it involves educating site staff about the protocol, procedures, and also applicable regulatory requirements. So during a site initiation visit, the CRA and project manager are going to educate the site about good clinical practice and also the particular study or the country regulatory requirements and the protocol related aspects, what, why, when has to be performed as per the protocol. And all your essential documents, how should you take an informed consent process, what all procedures involved in taking an informed consent process, whether do you need to record it, how AV has to be recorded. And we have also discussed about different logs, how to record the data into the log, how to record the information into the logs, how everything has to be recorded, maintained. Everything will be discussed during your site initiation visit. And how important it is to document the list of activities performed at site, and how important it is to understand about the good clinical practice and how to study the protocol, and how important it is that investigators should be aware about each and everything that is written in the protocol, because investigator is the person who is dealing with. So the main activities that we do in the study initiation is to train and prepare the study site for the enrollment. If you see in the study selection, site selection visit and site initiation visit, till now, there is no involvement of subjects. So we are preparing the study site about the protocol, about the clinical study, what activities and how, when they need to perform anything related to the clinical trial study. So during the site initiation visit, the sponsor or CRO provides training to the site staff. So who are site staff? Again, I'm listing principal investigator, sub-investigator, study nurses, pharmaco like this pharmacology related people, and quality assurance, quality management, field officers, and patient recruitment team, and anyone who is maintaining the documents, and quality control team, and IP management team. So there are many people associated in the study site staff. And we are also making sure about the documentation, because during the site initiation only, you would have got a regulatory approval like your DCG approval. So the ethics committee approval should be completed during your site initiation visit. So at least they should have submitted the draft document to the ethics committee. So the dossier, the list of essential documents, should have already been gone to your ethics committee. So you should be having all template documents related to your CRF, informed consent form, whatever we have seen in the before clinical trial commencement. We are providing training to the site staff on each and every document. So a site selection visit can be for 1 day or 2 days. A site initiation visit can happen for 2 to 3 days, because all trainings has to be provided to the site. We need to prepare the study site for the clinical trial, to face a clinical trial, the challenges, how and what, when has to be performed in a clinical trial. So we're training the site staff on study procedures, documentation requirements, how to maintain an investigator site file, how to submit a report to ethics committee, how an adverse event has to be recorded, and how a concomitant medication has to be recorded, and what protocol says, what investigator brochure says, how an SAE will be reported. Everything has to be trained to the study site staff by the sponsor and CRO. So the key objectives of this particular visit is to see the SIV, to ensure that the study site staff understands their roles and responsibilities, and review and finalize the study documents. They confirms the regulatory approvals. They acknowledge, they can understand what is the requirement we have in the clinical trial procedures. And they address any questions and concerns that they had before a clinical trial is started. So once a clinical trial is started, the investigator cannot come back and say that I didn't understand anything about this protocol. Please come and train me. So usually training will be performed throughout the clinical trial. So in case if there is any new staff, or in case if there is any deviations happening at the study site, CRA will always retrain the site. So, but the initial training, the initial elaborative explanation about the entire clinical trial and the study protocol will happen during the site initiation visit. And it is very important that everyone who is participating in this clinical trial as a study site staff, they should attend this site initiation visit. Everyone should be available. So here we are going to explain about how this investigational product should be opened, should be used, how you need to make it. Everything will be explained even in the site initiation visit. So what are the reports that you will have? So same in site initiation also, you will have a confirmation letter where you are going to write an email which explains about the dates. So I'm coming on so and so dates, and then I'm coming to the study site. And once site initiation is completed, then the site is ready for the site activation. So they can go ahead and start the screening process for the subject. So what is a screening process? We are going to explain about the inclusion exclusion criteria that are highlighted in the protocol as well. During the you are explaining and you are training everything about the clinical study protocol, and we are preparing the study site for the clinical trial commencement. And once this SIV is completed, and once you get an ethics committee approval, and once your clinical trial agreement is finalized, then we will be releasing site activation letter. So the sponsor and CRO is giving a green signal saying that the site can be activated and the subject can be enrolled. So there is going to be site initiation visit report. Okay. And also we are giving a site activation letter. So giving a site activation letter will show that the site can be activated. The site is ready to enroll the subjects. The site is ready to perform informed consent process, screening, complete their case report form, everything. So when site initiation visit is completed, our site is ready to do anything related to the clinical study protocol. And it is very important, a clinical trial will be started only after your site initiation visit. So not only CRA and project manager, many people who are working with clinical operation team, like your regulatory department, your regulatory affairs, and your records and management, your centralized monitoring, remote monitoring, all and data management team, everyone collaboratively work, okay, towards this development of essential document and development of study site. And also they are also part of the site initiation visits. Because without their involvement, all these documents are not in place. And because these documents and everything is ready, CR and project manager is going to explain everything in the site initiation visit, and they are going to teach the study site, even including your doctors, investigators, sub-investigators, everyone. And there should be a GCP certificate. GCP certificate means we are going to train them on good clinical practice, and all the study site staff will be certified that we are going to conduct a questionnaire exam as well to them, and they need to answer everything. And then a good clinical practice certificate will be provided to the study site staff. And only the GCP certified employees can work at study site, and applicable regulatory requirement certification as well. So there is everything that which will be trained to this particular site staff during the site initiation visits. So without site initiation visit, we cannot activate a clinical study site. So you are going to activate a clinical trial site only when a site initiation visit is completed. So it is very important that a site should be selected as per the protocol requirements, and site should be initiated, and even the delegation log that we discussed. So which person is doing which activity, and what is the set of trainings that we are providing to this particular delegated person. So IP management will be done by the pharmacist and also study nurse. So we are giving training to this study nurse and also pharmacist how to handle and then how to maintain the investigational product. So it is very important for all the study site staff to be participating in the site initiation visits. And it is very important that a site initiation visit is conducted, because even when an audit is happening, an inspection is happening, they're going to look out for these documents. And all the reports, what I'm saying, it will be filed in electronic trial master file, and it should also be filed in the investigator file. So site investigation file or investigator site file, both are same. It should be made available at the site, and this reports what I'm talking has to be taken as a printout, and it should be filed at the study site. Why it has to be filed? Because as mentioned, if it is not documented, it is not performed or it is not done in a clinical trial. We discussed about site selection visit and also site initiation visit. So during site monitoring visit, once the first subject first visit is achieved, so site monitoring visits are conducted between first subject first visit and last subject last visit. Site monitoring visits are conducted throughout the duration of the clinical trial to ensure that the study is being conducted according to the protocol, GCP guidelines, and applicable regulatory requirements. So during SMVs, monitors or CRAs review study documentations, source data, and participation records, the patient records, to verify data accuracy, participant eligibility, protocol adherence, and regulatory compliance. So we do check during site monitoring visit everything related to the clinical trials. So we will check whether the patient data has been properly recorded in the electronic case report forms and also in the case report forms, whether the site is being compliant with the protocol. And we do also see the source documentation and source data collection. And we do perform source data verification during the process of site monitoring visit. Key objectives in site monitoring visit are: the primary objective of SMVs are to monitor the progress of the trial. identify and address issues or protocol deviations or protocol violations, ensure participant safety and data integrity, and provide support and guidance to site staff as whenever needed. So it is very important to understand the importance of site monitoring visit, because we do perform source document review and source data verification during the site monitoring visit. So the entire safety and efficacy data will be established during the site monitoring visits. So patient enrollment and patient IP distribution will be the utmost activity that is performed during the site monitoring visit. So as part of sponsor and CRO, the individuals like CRAs and project managers has to oversee that the data is recorded accordingly and the data is reported to the required bodies accordingly. So after site monitoring visit, so when a last subject last visit is achieved, then we have site closeout visit. So after the last subject last visit is achieved, then we will have site closeout visit. So we are going to close the clinical trial and we are going to close the study site. So when we are closing a clinical trial project, we need to make sure everything related to that particular clinical project is clean and it is maintained properly, and no more additions will be required for that particular clinical trial. So any other systems we are using, like your trial master files, electronic data capture systems, any such systems, for that reason, we should make sure that all the data and information is recorded and every reporting aspect of monthly progression or clinical study report, anything related to the clinical trial is properly documented. The main purpose of the site closeout visit occurs at the end of a clinical trial, and it involves finalizing study procedures, collecting remaining data, and ensuring that all regulatory and administrative requirements are met for study closure. And the activities include monitoring, or representatives from the sponsor or CRO review the study documentation, resolve any outstanding queries or discrepancies, collect study-related materials, and confirm data completeness and accuracy. The main aim is data completeness. The primary objective of the study closeout visit, site closeout visit, are to ensure that all study activities have been completed according to the protocol, according to the regulatory requirements, and also according to the sponsor requirements. Collecting the final data and analyzing the final data and documents for analysis and reporting this final data to the required and applicable bodies. And we are formally closing the study site. And once the closeout visit is completed, there is a study closeout letter which we are going to submit to the ethics committee. And once the closeout visit is completed, now the sponsor will work on designing the clinical study report and analyzing the analysis of the clinical trial project. And now he will get ready for the marketing of the product into the real world evidence. So it is very important to make sure all the documents, all the data points are being perfectly aligned and assigned during the site closeout visit. So once the site closeout visit is completed, in case if there are any safety aspects that are found because of the clinical trial and the investigation product, then that will be made an account and then an additional information will be added to that particular clinical study. And once the closeout visit is completed, then we have done with the clinical trial and the clinical study. And now it's sponsor responsibility to use the safety data that has achieved during this conduct and then close out of a clinical trial. And this will be used further for any clinical trials or to release the drug or the molecule, the investigation product into the market. So we have seen the 4 visits and what activities that are performed during these 4 visits and why it is important to do a site selection visit, site initiation visit, site monitoring visit, and site closeout visit. So let us see different phases in a clinical trial project. So as we have seen in the essential documents, how we have before start of a clinical trial, during the start of a clinical trial, and after the completion of a clinical trial. So likewise, in the phases of a clinical trial project, we have three phases. We call it as a study startup phase, study conduct phase, and study closeout phase. So the conduct of a clinical trial typically involves three main phases: startup, conduct, and closeout. So each phase encompasses specific activities and milestones that are very crucial for the successive completion of a clinical trial. So we call it as a startup phase, conduct phase, and closeout phase. So during the startup phase, there are activities which are necessary to prepare for the site initiation of the clinical trial, including protocol development, regulatory submissions, site selection, site staffing, getting an approval by regulatory authority, getting an approval by ethics committee. So the main activities include protocol development, regulatory submission, site selection, and staff training. So whatever activities that we learned, that we discussed, that it will be performed during selection and initiation visit, they both are part of study startup phase. So drafting the clinical trial protocol, detailing the study objectives, designing the clinical trial protocol, describing the methodologies of this particular protocol, and participant eligibility criteria. All these are part of your protocol development. Regulatory submissions. Preparing and submitting regulatory documents to obtain approval from regulatory authorities and ethics committee. So we are preparing and submitting regulatory documents to obtain an approval. So an approval from regulatory department and a regulatory body is your regulatory submission and getting an approval. So not only regulatory approval, we are also getting approval from ethics committee. Site selection. We already studied what is a site selection. So staff training, providing training to site personnel on study procedures, protocol requirements, and good clinical practice. So site selection and staff training is nothing but your site initiation. These both are part of your study startup. We are starting the clinical trial and we are getting ready to start a clinical trial. What are the major milestones? So regulatory approvals obtained and investigational sites are activated and study documents are finalized and the study staffs are trained. These are the major milestones for the clinical trial startup phase. And then we have study conduct phase. So the main purpose of the conduct phase is the actual implementation of the clinical trial, including participant recruitment, data collection, study procedures, safety monitoring, and site management. The key activities in the clinical trial or in the study conduct phase or participant recruitment. So actively recruiting eligible participants according to the study protocol and inclusion-exclusion criteria. Data collection, collecting data on participant outcome. So after each visit is completed, we are collecting the subject data and the responses to the treatment, safety assessments, and the protocol deviations. In case if there is any protocol deviation that is found during a clinical trial conduct, we are going to collect and then record it. Study procedures, conducting study interventions, assessments, laboratory tests, and other procedures which are according to the protocol. Safety monitoring, monitoring participant safety, okay, whether how safe it is. In case if there is an adverse event, monitoring the adverse event, what is the start date, what is the stop date of an adverse event, and serious adverse events throughout the clinical trial. Site management, providing ongoing support and guidance and oversight to investigational sites to ensure protocol adherence and regulatory compliance. How a site is managed will be checked and then verified during the study conduct phase. So the major milestones are whether we have achieved the patient enrollment or not, whether the data is perfectly collected or not, the study procedures are completed or not, the safety aspects like your adverse events, serious adverse events, adverse drug reactions have been safely monitored or not, and how the protocol deviations are managed, reported, and then documented. So during the conduct phase only, we are getting the safety and efficacy data of the study conduct and of the clinical trial in this particular phase. And then we have study closeout phase. So the purpose includes activities necessary to conclude the clinical trial. So just like your study closeout phase, we are including the data analysis, final site visits, regulatory reporting, the final regulatory reporting, and study documentation archiving. So how we are analyzing the data? We are evaluating the study outcomes. What are the results so far that the clinical trial is conducted? What is the output? What is the efficacy output? What is the safety output? And what is the statistical significance of this particular data analysis? Site closeout visits. Conducting final visits to investigational sites to collect remaining data and to resolve queries, and to ensure compliance with the study procedures. Submitting final study reports is your regulatory reporting, and submitting the final safety data is your regulatory reporting. So archiving study documents, records, and the data in accordance with the regulatory requirements and sponsor policies. So the main milestones which are included in the study closeout are data analysis is completed or not, whether final visits are conducted or not, regulatory reports are finalized and submitted or not, and study documentation, whatever is applicable documents are being archived or not. So these are the three important phases in the clinical trials. We call it as a study startup phase, study conduct phase, and also study closeout phase. And these three are very important, and even your 4 visits will also fall into this criteria. So your site selection and initiation will sit into the startup phase. Your conduct, your site monitoring visits, and then SMVs will fall into your conduct phase, and your closeout will fall into the closeout phase. So then let's look into the clinical research team. And I'm assuming we have already discussed half of the clinical research team, like which includes your sponsor, investigator, study physicians, research nurse. So we have seen some of the clinical research team. Let us deep dive and see what are the different people involved in the clinical research team. So we all know the sponsor, and we discussed multiple times what sponsor does. He is the owner of the investigation product, and sponsor is going to look after the clinical trial. So he's the main pillar for a clinical trial. The financial support and the study related support will be given by the sponsor. And then we have investigator. So investigator, who is also called as a primary investigator or principal investigator, is the person who oversees all aspects of the clinical research study at study site. So investigator develop the study concept and write a detailed description of how the study will be conducted at the study site. An investigator is responsible to submit an approval to the site ethics committee. So in addition to this particular investigator oversees participant recruitment, because informed consent form is the activity of investigator only, and making sure that the participants understand their rights and agree to take part. So investigator also supervise the collection, analysis, and interpretation, and also presentation of the research results. So the principal investigator is ultimately responsible for everything in the clinical trial study that is happening at the site level. So sub-investigator is the another physician who are working with the principal investigator. So these doctors work with the PI to monitor and care for people who take part in the clinical study. So all our subjects, they treat patients, meaning our subjects, according to the clinical trial design. And they evaluate and record patient responses and document the side effects. So sub-investigator is also almost and very similar to the principal investigator. But here, sub-investigator is helping and supporting the principal investigator with the clinical trial related activities. So we were discussing about research nurse. Research nurses specializes in the delivery and management of clinical trials at trial sites. So nurse will be handling the investigational product under the guidance of principal investigator. So principal investigator is the main lead in the study site, and study nurse will be working under the principal investigator. So the IP management, to open the IP in case if it is a vaccination, and to utilize the IP and to administrate the IP into the subjects will be taken care by research nurse under the guidance of principal investigator. So they are often part of a team which will be led by the principal investigator and will usually be involved in the recruitment and consent of trial participants, and also in the conduct and organization of trial related procedures which are in compliant with the trial protocol. So research nurses are often will be taking part during the informed consent process. They will help the investigator with the informed consent document, and also they will collect the information that is required in the informed consent form with this guidance and the support of principal investigator. So informed consent is taken only by the principal investigator. None of the other site staff are responsible to collect the informed consent form. It's only principal investigator who has to collect the informed consent form. So this team member often explains study details to the patients, to the site staff, and also to the health providers in the community who might refer their patients. So usually there will be community heads who will come and refer patients to the hospitals for our clinical trials. So research nurse is going to explain about the basics of the study before someone comes to the study site. So she will explain about the outline of a clinical trial study wherein the principal investigator is the main person who's going to review and explain about the informed consent process. So the person, the study nurse, also helps with the giving the study medicines and assist the PI in monitoring for the side effects. So if you see, after principal investigator, we had sub-investigator, and the closely working person with the principal investigator and sub-investigator who especially deals the investigation product is a study nurse. And not only these activities, any activities which checks about the vital information checking or checking the blood pressure, collection of blood samples, or if there are any side effects, and even the 24/7 point of contact can be our study nurse. So study nurse is a very important role in the clinical trial research team, and other research people and the other team, whoever is working in the clinical trial, will be closely associated with the study nurse. If there is a requirement and if you want to know about IP management and IP accountability, the data coordinators or the clinical operational team can always contact the research nurse as well. So research nurse is going to help us to find any side effects or to give a more explanation on the side effects. So it is not only principal investigator, there is another person called research nurse who is responsible in collection of the adverse events. And then we have biostatistician or medical statistician. So statistics is a subject where they're going to deal with the mean meridian calculations. So statistics is also dealing with the data science. So it is a discipline that concerns the collection, organization, analysis, interpretation, and pretension of the data. So the presentation of the data is utmost important in the clinical trial. So everywhere it is all about, data collection, recording the data, maintaining the data, testing the data. So it's all about the data collection. So in applying statistic to a scientific model, like a clinical trial model, a statistical model is very important. So there can be a diverse population or diverse subject people that we are using. So this statistics will especially help us to collect the data and to maintain it correctly. So usually an experimental study involves taking measurements of the system and also taking different data collections from the subject. So we need to manipulate the system and take this additional information from the subjects, and we need to showcase in a graphical representation. And there are different methods that this biostatistician will use. They use data analysis method, and they'll also use the descriptive statistics methods. So a census data, when there is a huge amount of data that has been collected, So the statistician people will help a lot in then scrutinizing and also representing in a good mannered way. So all our experimental studies and observational studies, in both this type of studies, there is a difference in the variable values. And this difference in the variable values will be studied by the statistic analysis. So the statistics will also be used to design it and to know about the sample size, to understand how this study clinical trial or the clinical trial subject is going to take place, and to know about how different aspects, in case if there are n number of adverse events coming on for a clinical trial, how it is going to cause a risk in the clinical trial event. So for any aspect in the clinical trial, statistician will help us to minimize a bigger data into the smaller data. So medical statisticians are responsible for providing statistical and methodological advice throughout the trial life cycle and assisting with the study design. So study design assisting, we discussed about parallel and crossover design. So it is very important that the statistician will decide the design for the study. And they will also be involved in the study conduct and also analyzing of the clinical trial. So it is very important to analyze the clinical trial so that during the completion of the clinical trial, we will have a clear picture of the good data that we are getting out of a clinical trial. So statistician will perform sample size calculation. So sample size is the number of participants that are required in a clinical trial. So it is important that the sample size, so for example, we have studied about different phases in a clinical trial. So the sample size in phase 1 will be 50 to 100. The sample size in phase 2 can be 300. So this sample size calculations and the availability of the patient pool in that particular area, statistical people has going to analyze. And even the statistical people you can see in the data management team as well, where they're going to calculate, and then we're going to make a plan to achieve that particular sample size. And they're going to write the statistical analysis plan and contribute this statistical analysis plan to the overall design of the clinical trial. Statistical people are not only involved in designing the sample size and also designing the study protocol, they are also involved in case of any mathematical analysis requirement. Our entire clinical trial is about analyzing the safety and efficacy data. So when we are receiving different data from the different subjects from different sites, so when we give this lump sum of data to the statistical people, they're going to represent this in a very good manner, in a pictorial representation, in a graphical representation, and they're giving that data back to us. So it is very easy with the help of the statistical and data management people to represent the data in a good manner. And it is in an understandable way. So this statistician will be heavily involved in writing the corresponding sections of the grant applications and also the protocol. So designing the data collection tools and testing the trial databases that we are using in the clinical trial will also be carried by the statistician and the medical statistician people. So it is very important to have a statistician in the clinical research team. Health economist. So health economist is alongside determining the effectiveness of an intervention and clinical trials, which will often also conduct on economic evaluation. See, we discussed about observational studies where we are involving a different group of people and we're just collecting the data from them. So what this especially health economist will do, they apply the theories of production, efficiency, and disparities and competitions and also regulations to better inform the public and private sector on the most efficient, cost-effective, and equitable course of treatment and action. So in any research, in any, not only a clinical research, in any research that they are doing, they usually use health economics. So health economy is an applied field of study that allows for the systematic and rigorous examination of the problems. which are based, in prompting health and then public health, which are used in it. By applying this economic theories of consumer, sponsored CROs, health economics aims to understand the behavior of the individual and also healthcare providers and also the public and private organizations like our sponsor and CRO. And also they help the government in taking the decision by providing the background of the public health, and they promote clinical trial activities a lot. So even a government body and a regulatory body can also have a health economist who will support and who will plan the details of the development of a clinical trial. So anyone who's bachelor's with economics or anyone who's bachelor's with any health life sciences can also become a health economist. So there are good amount of opportunities for health economists. It's completely a different role, which they're going to analyze the aspects and the public health and the public requirement in the development or in the disease criteria, and what is the upcoming epidemic or pandemic situations that we can face. All this can be studied by health economists, and they will inform the government bodies, to have such sort of requirements in clinical trials. So a consideration of cost alongside effectiveness is used to inform decision making by the organizations like sponsors and CROs, who determine what treatment should be endorsed in a healthcare system. So for example, UK has an NHS, National Health Services, and they have this health economist. And India, even the government body in India, the DCGI CDSCO, will also have health economist openings. So health economists will be involved in the design of the clinical trial to incorporate an economic component and in the cost analysis of the data collected. So usually in clinical trial, health economists will be sitting in the sponsor level. So a trial manager or a trial coordinator. So usually at site level, there will be n number of activities. See, we discussed about informed consent form, case report form, maintaining of the documents. We discussed about essential documents. There is a lot of work that has to be done in the clinical study site. So not only at the clinical study site, but also from the CRO perspective. So everyone in a clinical trial industry will have hands-on work. So the day-to-day management and organization of a randomized controlled trial is the responsibility of the trial manager. So there will be again trial coordinators, central monitoring team who will be working under this trial manager role. And this trial managers, they are instrumental in the planning and delivering of the trial. So they are going to have, so trial manager will have a group of people under his team. So any fresher can also join as a coordinator under the trial manager. So the main responsibility of this people is to ensure that the trial is being delivered in compliance with the protocol. And all applicable regulatory requirements and all applicable things like collection of informed consent form, taking signatures, usage of an LAR, usage of an impartial witness, everything has been properly carried and maintained, documented properly. So trial managers usually work in the CROs and sponsor organizations, and they will set up clinical site meetings. And they will prepare the site for ethics committee submissions and also regulatory submissions. And we discussed about site initiation visit, right? The entire training to the site initiation visit to the site staff will be provided by the trial managers. And they're going to describe about the protocol, essential documents, the processes that are involved in the clinical trial, and collection of informed consent form, documenting it, how to file an investigator site file, how to use an electronic trial master file, and what are the systems like electronic data capture system, EDC systems that they're using. Everything will be trained by the trial manager. And trial manager is having an oversee of the activities performed in the clinical trial. They will also maintain, yes, oversight of the trial sites and take appropriate action to ensure good recruitment and the quality and timelines of the data collection. Data collection, data maintenance, data recording, and also data reporting. So everything related to the data will be overseen by the clinical trial managers. So data manager. So obviously there is a data management department as well. So how we have clinical operations, we will have data management department as well. And to this data management department, there will be a data manager. So this data manager is responsible for managing a clinical trial and also managing the guidelines and also managing the data collection and data requirements. Okay, so data managers is responsible in gathering the data and sorting this data and assessing the customer needs. So he basically does collection, analyzing and storing of this large amount of data in the electronic data capture system. So data security, data quality, data governance, everything is an activity that is performed by the data manager. So data analyst, data managing, and then there are different aspects in the data management, like how we have discussed startup, conduct, and closeout. Even in the data management, there will be activities that data management people will perform during the startup, during the closeout, and also during the conduct phase. This will include ensuring timely returns of the data and entering the data onto the trial database, that is our electronic data capture systems, and checking for inconsistencies. And we are going to raise a query in case if there is any inconsistency in the data. And if there is any incomplete data, again, we are going to raise the query. So when a query is raised, the main accountable person to resolve that particular query is going to resolve the open query. So the data manager will perform regular systematic checks to validate. So data validation is also one of the important activity that a data manager does. So data manager will verify information on the database in order to produce a clean, accurate, and complete set of data analysis. So according to the data management is the development, execution and supervision of this particular data that we are collecting from the patients. So when we say there are different visits in the clinical trial, so we are going to collect the information of this different visits from each subject. And this each subject data management activity and data management records will be filed. So they execute the quality check, they execute a quality checks, they design the CRF. When I talk about EDC and case report form, data manager is the person who is designing it. And how they are designing this case report form? By the help of protocol. They are looking into the protocol, they are reading the protocol, they are understanding the protocol, and they are trying to implement all protocol requirements into a report. And that report is called case report form. And at study level, we are going to record the data in the case report forms. So in some instances, a trial administrator may also have additional responsibilities assisting the trial coordinator and also trial manager. So under data manager, again, you will have different set of rules, and you can see the different people working under the data manager as well. So data manager will have clinical data coordinators, clinical data senior data manager, and data manager lead. There are different roles again associated with the management. So clinical trial management lead. We have seen trial manager, and trial manager is going to report the clinical trial management lead. See, these are the different senior positions that you can see in a clinical research team. And whenever you are working as a fresher, you are going to report to this particular people in the clinical research industry. So within the clinical trial units, there are often trial management team leads who are responsible for the delivery of the clinical trial within their portfolio, and also for leading and developing a team of trial management staff. So portfolios may be based on different disease areas or type of trials. So clinical trial management lead will oversee the management of the clinical trials in their remit. So taking an active role in providing specialist trial management advice. And clinical trial manager lead will also contribute to the design and costing of a new trial proposals. So clinical trial manager also will look into the resource management. Like for example, how many people are required to complete a particular activity in the clinical trial. And also clinical trial manager is going to oversee the activities and the responsibilities of this particular team who are part of this clinical trial management. So your CRAs, like clinical research associate, clinical trial associates, everyone will be reporting to the clinical trial managers. So they will have like anything related to your essential documents, CTAs, financial aspects, and then having so specific calls with the sponsor, talking to the CRO related activities, improvising any procedures at the study site level. Trial management lead is going to take part in it. And anything related to the study site publications and anything related to the presentations of this study site will be taken care by the clinical trial management lead. So trial programming. So usually anyone who knows about Python programming and SAS programming, we will have a trial programmer. So when I say CRF designing, so when we are be represented in this format, I need a help of a programmer who are going to program that particular code and making it to be applicable and visible in the EDC system. So the trial programmer is responsible for the design, development, and implementation and documentation of a number of database applications for clinical trials. Database applications may include your electronic trial master file, electronic data capture system, there is an IWRS system, and there can be a clinical trial management system. And there can be anything like a vendor system where different peoples are trying to access and information from the clinical trial system. So IRT systems like interactive response technologies and IVRS, interactive voice responses technologies, interactive web responses systems. So in case if there is an adverse event reporting, in case if an app is used by the subjects or the clinical trial participants, so how to record that app and what sort of information will be taken from the app and how this particular app will be interfaced between the CTMS and also electronic trial master file. So trial programmer for a clinical trial, he helps to record the trial data and the participant data to have an perfect outcome data. So trial management systems that are used to run randomized controlled trials will be developed using the off-the-shelf or bespoke systems. So not only this, they can also use a SAS programming and also Python programming. So that there are different web-based programs and there are different server-based programs which are used to collect the data from the subject. And this collected data from the subject will be put into the systems. So when the data is available in the system, again, the statistical programmer is using the system and trying to represent this system in a report. So report making and then clinical report making is an important task in the clinical trial because you are going to get the data and we are trying to put this entire data representation to the public domain. So we are getting the safety and efficacy aspects of this particular data in the report. So then we have quality assurance team. So the QA team is responsible for the development, maintenance of the quality management system. So whenever there is a different teams and then different aspects involved, not only in the clinical research, but also in the different departments, there should be a quality team as well who need to oversee the activities and the works performed in this particular electronic systems or paper-based system for any system in that case. So the QA team, the quality assurance team, are responsible for the development and maintenance of the quality management systems and for the training of the site staff on the quality management systems. So the QA team will implement a program of quality checks So whenever I say like each one of them, whenever they are working for the clinical trial, we're going to see whether the activities performed by that particular person is up to the mark. How we are going to do that? We are going to do quality checks. We're going to see whether they have done whatever they have done is as per protocol or not. So the QA team will work on behalf of an organization. If you take a sponsor organization, sponsor will have a QA team. If you take a CRO will have a QA team. So the QA team will work on behalf of these organizations, and the sponsor will have a QA team, CRO can have a QA team, and even the study site and even the ethics committee can also have a quality assurance team. So then we have clinical trial monitor. So we discussed about CRA in the earlier classes, right? So clinical trial monitor is responsible to check the activities performed at the study site. So the sponsor is responsible for ensuring that clinical trials are adequately monitored. So when I spoke about site selection visit, site initiation visit, everything is also an activity performed by the clinical trial monitor. So he need to ensure that the site is ready, site is prepared, and then site is following clinical trial monitor is the main point of contact between the sponsor and CRO organizations. So he is, because, we cannot directly call investigator and ask what and how whatever is happening at the study site. So we're going to call the clinical trial monitor. So we're going to ask clinical trial monitor about the updates related to safety, updates related to efficacy, update related to patients 1 to 3, patients 4, 5, 6, how they are doing, what is the progression. And in case if the data is not entered, we're going to talk to the monitor. So clinical trial monitor is the main pillar of the clinical study, where the intercommunications between all the stakeholders will be handled by the clinical trial monitor. So clinical trial monitor will ensure that the trial is being conducted according to the protocol, GCP, and applicable regulatory requirements. So whenever you're facing an interview also, don't forget to use this repeated line which says accordance with the protocol, good clinical practice, and regulatory requirements. So clinical trial monitor is appointed on behalf of the sponsor to perform the duties required to provide the sponsor with the assurance, because we said that he is the pillar between all the stakeholders. And he is checking on behalf of sponsor, clinical trial monitor is checking the data accuracy and ensuring that safety issues have been adequately reported. So in the industry, the term often used to describe this clinical trial monitor role is clinical research associate. So the CRA is the synonym of clinical trial monitor. So within the pharmaceutical industries and also a sponsor and CRO will have a role called a CRA. So the role of the CRA can vary from one organization to another organization. So typically, as informed, CRA acts as a liaison between the trial management team and the trial sites. The main responsibility of a CRA will be in the monitoring and oversight of the trial to ensure data credibility and protocol compliance and applicable regulatory guidelines. And the role of the CRA can therefore be similar to the role of the clinical trial monitor. In other organizations, the CRA will, in addition to set up and close down a clinical trial site. So clinical trial monitor is specifically looking into the monitoring activities, wherein a CRA will also be applicable and will do selection, initiation, and also closeout. And CRA may also take on some trial management responsibilities similar to that of the trial manager. So a CRA may therefore be an additional project management support. So a CRA will also perform project manager related activities. And this can again differ from one organization to another organization. Then we have a team called pharmacovigilance. So in a pharmacovigilance team, there will be safety trainees, senior safety trainees, or safety head. So this pharmacovigilance team is helping to monitor the safety aspects, and it is also helping to report the adverse events. Not only adverse events, adverse drug reactions, and also your serious adverse events that occur during the conduct of a clinical trial. So this includes collecting of this adverse event and documenting the adverse event related data and tracking the adverse event related data to ensure timely reporting of the pharmacovigilance and safety related activities. So a safety trainee in clinical research is an entry-level position focused on learning and supporting the safety and regulatory aspects of a clinical trial. So for adverse event, you will have adverse event log, adverse event form, case report form, where in case if there is an adverse event, the information has to be captured everywhere. And it is very important to capture this information because we are studying about safety and efficacy in a clinical trial. And then we have TMF specialist. So a trial master file specialist plays a crucial role in clinical research by managing and maintaining the trial master file. So a trial master file is an electronic trial master file. So it is just like your EDC system. We will have eTMF, where we are going to file all essential documents that are applicable to be filed in the trial master file. So TMF is a collection of essential documents that allow the conduct of a clinical trial to be reconstructed and evaluated. So the TMF is crucial for regulatory compliance and quality assurance. So when I say an investigator is working for a study site, at a study site, then when I want to see the medical registration certificate of this particular investigator, I'm not going back to the study site and asking for this document. This document should be available in the electronic trial master file. So likewise, any such document which supports the clinical trial should be made available in the electronic trial master file. So the main activities for the TMF specialist will include document management. So receiving the document, you will receive a scanned and certified copy, and you need to check whether all applicable documents and the requirements signatures are present in the document. And then you are going to file this document in the electronic trial master file. And you're going to see the compliance within the document. Anything cannot be a document. It should be a properly maintained. And the quality control, how quality and then the quality of scanning also is important in a documentation. And maintenance of these documents, archiving of these documents, okay, training of these documents, training and support related information as well. So when I say site selection visit, there will be a number of documents related to site selection visit, and that has to be filed. We discussed about before, during, and after clinical trial. So everything has to be made available in the trial master file. And who can have access to this electronic trial master file? Your sponsor can view this electronic trial master file. Your CRO can view it. Your study site can also go ahead and view it. So it is very important that any document that is filed is following ALCA principles. ALCA principles means having an accurate data, attributable data, a contemporaneous. So ALCA stands for accurate, attributable, contemporaneous, original, and legible complete document. So it is saying that it should have all proper information and maintained with a good quality. Then we have medical writer. So medical writers work as a part of scientific writing team. So when we talk about, protocol and then informed consent form, medical writer is also supporting because there will be scientific terminologies and then technical terms used in the document. Medical writer is helping to support and improvise these documents. And they play a critical role in the communication process of outlining the goals, strategies, analysis, and medical understanding of a clinical trials. The medical writing role includes communicating to patients, sites, sponsors, and regulatory agencies, because the communication should be very technical and it should be in a medical terms. and involves the preparation of clinical documents like protocols, clinical study reports, and investigator brochure. So medical writers help in designing these essential documents of a clinical trial protocol. And then we have an interesting presentation of organogram. So far, we have studied different departments and then different people, the main people involved in the clinical research. Now let us see under each department how the hierarchy is starting. So there are different departments like clinical operations, data management, pharmacovigilance, medical writing, biostatistics, business development, quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and medical affairs. So let us see each department and what is the starting position and what is the highest position in this particular department. So in the clinical operations, you can start with the role called in-house CRA or clinical trial assistant or clinical research coordinator at site. So once you're done with this, at least 1 or 2 years, if you are experienced in this role, then you can work as a clinical research associate. And it has 1, 2, and 3, depending on the experience. Then we have senior clinical research associate. So in this particular downline, you can also see there is something called remote and centralized monitoring, where the role is very similar to clinical research associate, but they are doing everything and all the monitoring activities by sitting at the company, by sitting at the organization. By sitting at one position, they are trying to remotely work with the all aspects of the clinical trial. Then post to senior clinical research associate, we have clinical team leader. So on top of clinical team leader, we have project manager, and project manager is going to report to the clinical operation manager. That is the head of the clinical op. And then you can have associate director or director roles as well within the clinical operations department. Then we have data management. So in the data management, we might have clinical data coordinator or clinical data analyst or clinical data executive roles as the fresher roles. And post to that, you will be clinical data quality manager. Then after that, clinical data validation programmer. Then you can become an assistant data manager, then lead data manager, then head of the data management. Again, post to that, you can find an associate director and director level roles under the data management as well. So coming to pharmacovigilance, we will be starting with the associate role, a safety associate role, safety training role, or a pharmacovigilance assistant role. So you will start a role like that. And then we will have a quality safety trainer role. Then it can change to a medical monitor, where we are reviewing the safety aspects, and a safety expert. Then a PV, pharmacovigilance physician, 1, 2 roles. Then head of the pharmacovigilance. Under medical writing, you will have an executive role where we will be looking and assisting with the medical heads of the medical writer and helping them in designing of the clinical trial related documents like protocols, informed consent forms, investigator brochures, case report forms. All such documents will be initiated by the medical writer and it will be discussed among within the clinical operations team. So each department has to closely work with the other department. So this is called interdepartmental working as well. So that doesn't mean that if you are a safety trainee, you are just talking to the manager and you are dealing only safety related activities. There will be high chances that you will work with clinical operations team as well to understand the recording of the safety aspects in the systems. So each department will have departmental wise calls and they're going to discuss on the progression of the clinical trial. And then we have biostats department. So this biostats department is, closely interrelated with the data management team. So you will start with a trainee analyst role, then you will be a statistician validation expert, then a SAS programmer, then a lead biostatistician, then head in the biostatistics. So biostatistics will closely work with the data management and operations team. And then we have business development team. So you can start your career as an executive role and then move to a development manager role. Business development is also important because we need to attract the sponsors and we need to impress the study site in case if you're working with CROs. So everywhere there is a communication is important and we need to have more projects so that the company can run. And as discussed, each department should have the quality control. So each department will be an oversight of the quality management. So quality people has to do quality checks and they need to see each department is working properly as per the GCP requirements and applicable regulatory guidelines. So quality assurance trainee assistants or quality control trainee assistants, and then an executive role. Then you will have a lead auditor or lead quality management role. Then you can become a head quality assurance or head quality control role. So auditing, internal audits, internal inspections will be performed by the quality assurance team. And then we have regulatory affairs. So regulatory affairs is looking into the ethics committee submissions, regulatory body like DCGA or USFDA or Health Canada. Any country specific submissions will be taken care by the regulatory affairs department. So they have executive role and they have assistant manager role, then manager role, then head of the regulatory affairs. And then we have medical affairs where we are discussing about the regulatory aspects within the different countries. And medical affairs and regulatory affairs will always have a communication between the clinical operations team. And they also need to follow up with the medical writing team about the protocol finalization, about the protocol, and then informed consent form finalization as well. So medical affairs will be communicating about the regulatory requirements of different country bodies and then how a clinical operations and data management team should work. So far we have seen about the vast concept of the clinical research and clinical trials. We have learned in this minimal hour, we have learned a lot about clinical research. And I am assuring you that before starting this particular course, you wouldn't have known many terminologies and many aspects of a clinical trial. By completing this course, you have gained a lot of knowledge in the clinical trials and what a sponsor do, what an investigator do, what are the principles of a clinical trial, how many phases we had in a clinical trial, and what are the different types of clinical research, what is the history of the clinical research, and what are the responsibilities of ethics committee, what are the basic terminologies we are using in the clinical research. And what are the different clinical research team we have? What are the different types of visits we had? What are the three main phases in the clinical trials, like your startup, conduct, and closeout phase? And how each department is interdependent on other department. And we have learned the basics of each role, each department. You can always search in the Google, you can always search for the job description of clinical research associate and learn about what they do. So there is a lot of learning in this short module about clinical research. And trust me, you would have got many terminologies about investigation product and the maintenance, accountability, informed consent process. How important the informed consent process is and how we are screening, what is the inclusion and exclusion criteria in a protocol. So please listen to the recording and properly maintain the notes. And when you revise this terminologies and these concepts of clinical research, trust me, you will be interview ready. You can easily clear an interview which is related to data management or clinical operations or pharmacovigilance, the fresher interview, by just learning the basic concepts of the clinical research. And this module will definitely help you to reach higher goals in your career. So I wish you all the best. And I wish you all the best from the Cliniversities. Thank you so much for attending this module.